Hey guys, and welcome to the channel. I'm Josh, and in this week's video I'm going to do a walkthrough of how I made these renders of characters playing with their own toys. Each of them is an iconic pop culture character playing with their own action figures. I was originally going to call this series Characters Playing With Themselves, but I realized that might not bring in the right kind of audience. The idea for the series came from the show I did at the beginning of the month, The Toy Shelf, where my toy shelf comes to life. For that, I had the idea in mind of using these really iconic toy lines like vintage Star Wars figures, G.I. Joe, Transformers, and as I was making it, I started to think, what would a scene of the real versions of these characters playing with their action figures look like? I started, as everyone always should, with Star Wars, after deciding on using Boba Fett, and after messing around with the idea of maybe setting the scene of Boba Fett on Boba's ship, after we saw the interior of it in The Mandalorian Season 2, I decided that would be way too complicated of a scene to build and animate, especially for such a small and simple animation. So instead I found this really nice Tatooine looking hangar on CG Trader, and really that's about 90% of the work done. The hangar looks great and is built really well, and all I actually had to do was move a few things around and mess around with the lighting. For Boba himself, I used these Star Wars Battlefront 2 models, which if anyone wants to know where to get those models, just search for them. They're extremely easy to find now, and they all look great. Once I had that model set up, I knew it was quite a specific animation I wanted Boba to act out, so I put him into deep motion and filmed myself acting out the scene. I applied the animation deep motion made from the footage of me to the model itself. I did need to clean it up a little bit, and I actually had filmed a much longer scene with a lot more to it. In that version, it was kind of like this therapy session for Boba Fett, who was acting out an emotional scene with a toy of him and his dad. But I realized it was a bit much. It wouldn't seamlessly loop, which I wanted all of these renders to do, and it involved me pulling off a Boba Fett impression for about 2 minutes, and I can't even do one for 2 seconds. So I just cut out most of the more complicated parts, and all I ended up keeping was the end of the scene, where Boba was flying the toys around as if they were on their jetpacks. I know his hands are a little bit floaty, but I'm okay with it overall. After placing Boba and framing up the camera, and further rearranging a few things, I altered the lighting and set up a stormtrooper to walk by in the background, added a bit of camera shake and all the audio, and it was good to go. The Ninja Turtles was the second scene I put together, and really follows a pretty similar process. I found this really good model online, which is really well rigged and posed and ready for some solid animation, and I hate to admit I just ripped all of that out there and used the shell, no pun intended, because I knew I wanted this nice simple animation from Mixamo for all of the turtles. I added this video game playing animation to each of the turtles and altered their intensity, posture, and speed, making it look like a different but relatively similar movement. I changed it the most for Michelangelo, who is the only one actually playing with the vintage toys and not playing on a video game, although I know that his movement, static expression, and the fact he doesn't blink kind of make it look like he's on drugs, especially the longer you look at just him. For the environment, I wanted an old school, kind of nice looking sewer, as nice as you can make a sewer look anyway. So I got this modular sewer pack and played around with a few different setups. A lot like the Boba Fett animation, I had a much more complicated idea in my head for this whole TMNT scene. The original version was something like this, but you could see little offshoots from this main sewer tunnel where each of the turtles had their own bedroom, and I was going to sort of put a lot of Easter eggs and cool nods to the history of the characters in there, but it just got too complicated to fit into a relatively static scene. This one came a long way with adding a blue light that goes up and down in intensity to simulate the screen, and the audio of water and echoing and the video game noises themselves all really helped as well. For this one, I actually started with the environment rather than the characters, and I think that's the only one I did this with. I knew I wanted something that looked like Castle Grayskull, and that I was going to use some part of the Kit Bash 3D Medieval Siege kit. Like all of these shorts, I wanted the scene to make sense and for the character to fit, but also for it to be pretty generic and not too specific as to where exactly they are. Boba Fett is just in generic Tatooine Star Wars looking hangar, Snake Eyes is in some sort of military compound, Optimus Prime is just in a yard of shipping containers. They could all be taking place whenever and wherever. They just needed to look and generally feel like it made sense. And for He-Man, I thought the medieval siege kit would work really well. What I didn't realise was that even there, I was overthinking it. After I built a rough version of Castle Grayskull, I had He-Man in a corner in the courtyard, near the gates, and I tried a bunch of different areas. But in the end, just sticking him up in the turret at the castle entrance with barely anything else in view is what I like the best. I framed it up so you could see that part of the castle was broken. I think it's important for Castle Grayskull, it's very old and rough looking. I removed a bunch of the props and put the table and chairs in place, and I was happy with the scene setup. For He-Man, I went to Real Illusion's character creator and made a sort of generic, muscled up looking guy with blonde hair. I made it with a few parts that weren't quite right. He doesn't actually have any fur around his boots. I knew we wouldn't be getting too close as I'd framed up the scene and built that side of things first, so as long as it was about what it needed to be, I was going to be okay with it. From there I edited the figure in Blender, I added his chest plate, which is a 3D print file from Thingiverse. I made the straps on his torso metallic rather than leather, and I changed his hair colour to be a bit more yellow and his skin to be a little bit more orange, just to give more of a hint to that original toy. The last touches were adding a few more props from the Master of the Universe. I got, also from Thingiverse, a model of He-Man's shield, a Man-at-Arms mace, as well as a tiny Castle Grayskull. I threw all of these in there and just added some really simple metallic and plastic textures to them. And I know, like with the other ones, the movement isn't perfect on this one. It does look a bit weird, I know that. But at the same time, this is a guy sitting in his superpowered form, playing with toys of himself and a toy of the castle he's sat in, so the whole thing's a bit weird anyway. I threw in some audio in there, added some camera shake, and it was all done. And that's mostly it. If you've got any questions, put those in the comments below and I'll do my best to answer them. And don't forget to check out the other renders I've done, and to see more shorts, breakdowns and render series like this, be sure to like and subscribe.